and welcome to the Power of Pro Wrestling official podcast. My name is Robert Red, and I am going to be joined by my host, D. Chris Smith, this week. Hey, D, how are you doing today?
Oh, super fly, super crispy. What about you, bro?
I'm doing good. Well, this is a new podcast that you and me have kind of decided on doing, and what's going to happen on this very initial podcast is we are going to do a series of 5 questions. You and me have kind of comprised 5 questions that we want to kind of debate and discuss, and we've kind of set a 2-minute mark on these. Well, I'm going to get my timer out, and we'll start the time after each question. So I want to start with, my question is, what is the impact of independent companies on professional wrestling? So I kind of want to get your thoughts. Let me set the clock, and I'll let you start.
Well, I think the impact of independent companies on pro wrestling, if you look at Ring of Honor, I would consider them an independent company, but I'll have to look at some of the developmental companies like USWA. The Memphis promotion for a long, long time has always been one of the independent companies. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I've really done my research, kind of like you and me have been researching on this program all day. And really, I mean, I have to really point out 4 names here. You have to really consider, I'm glad you mentioned Ring of Honor, because you've got WWE is being dominated by CM Punk as their champion. Daniel Bryan's a major star. And the opposition, TNA, they have Austin Aries and another Ring of Honor faithful, Samoa Joe. So, I mean, I really think independent companies have played a major part or a major role in pro wrestling. And I think it's here for the future to come. So, I mean, do you really have any more thoughts before we move?
Well, I was going to say, also look at pro wrestling companies in the past as well, because pro wrestling companies in the past, let's not just try to look forward to just the companies that are right now, like FCW and Ring of Honor. And like I said, I consider Ring of Honor as one of the big 3 because they're on major national television, even with a conglomerate backing them. I'll also have to look at past promotions in the past that help us the superstars today, like the USWA, as I said earlier. Think of how The Rock got his big start. Think of how Jerry Lawler and a ton of Hall of Famers have came through the Memphis promotion.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, you do make some very valid points. And really, I mean, my question was directed toward today, but I mean, I do totally agree. Independent promotions have played a major part. And time's almost up for this, so I mean, you want to gear up and do question number 2?
Well, here we go with the very next question. Professional wrestling overseas has gotten a big time mark as far as WWE and TNA and even Ring of Honor is concerned. Because overseas has become a big deal. It's pretty much like you're rock stars overseas than you are in the States in it. And here's my question. Why is professional wrestling more respected overseas than it is in the United States, despite, the First Amendment?
Well, really, I think my answer to that question, Cornbread or D, is that really wrestling, that the mystery has been killed about it. I mean, with Vince McMahon and a lot of people coming out and revealing the secrets of wrestling, I think a lot of people don't respect it as a sport anymore, and they see it as just pure entertainment. And well, as overseas, like Japan especially, they sit and they watch, they study matches. They're very respectful. They don't really make a lot of noise, which really, as an American, that drives me crazy. But that just goes to show you there's different styles, different cultures. So, I mean, what's kind of your take on that?
I also think about the audience point of view, because here's the thing. Different audiences differ for different sports. And in this case, as far as wrestling is concerned, a lot of times we're more used to the cheer for the good guy, boo for the bad guy. And if you study ECW's audience, if you study Ring of Honor's audience, and even if you study Japan's audience or just a pure wrestling audience from that perspective, a lot of times a lot of the audience would kind of just go silent and just let the pure art of wrestling speak for itself. And to me, I think that kind of has a big effect on it as well. I mean, you necessarily don't have to choose for the good guy or the bad guy, and a lot of times they'll use their First Amendment right, which is not normally lenient for television.
Yeah, I mean, you do make a lot of good points there, Cornbread, as to what that. I mean, and it's just it's a lot different. And
well, with it being different, I would say, all sports different, and the reason why all sports different is because, if you go to major certain sports events, you will hear, the home chant, and then they'll boo the visiting team. Well, pro wrestling's not like that. Sometimes it's a good guy, sometimes it'll be a bad guy, but that's what makes our sport our sport.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Now, I'm going to move on to my next question, which is a very good question. And I've talked to my first question, as you remember, was the impact of independent companies. Well, my next question, what's the impact of backyard wrestling on the world of professional wrestling? And really some stats before we get this started. I was doing my research on GMA, and this is some old stats. There was 600 backyard feds, and they keep growing every day. And really there's some points I want to point out, but I'll let you get your thoughts in first.
Well, when you talk about backyard wrestling, depending on which terminology that you use, because the Guerrero family, to be honest, the Guerrero family for many, many years have set up a ring in their backyard, and they have trained. I mean, it's a family business. But as far as backyard wrestling, I think it's had a tremendous impact on the whole entire sport. Not just so much as, violence and this, and this, but also with the impact of, the Mick Foleys and the Hardy Boys. And to me, that's one of the things where, yes, we do see the rating. Don't try this at home.
Yeah, and I mean, you pretty much have made all the points I want down, because, I mean, you see in the WWE videos, they have the don't try this at home, and I think that's really a response of the siblings wrestling and all the homicides that you hear about on the news, radio, and everything like that. So, I mean, I really think that's the impact of backyard wrestling. And I'm glad you did mention and Foley and Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy. I mean, Foley, he really has a negative effect in terms of professional wrestling. I mean, I like Mick Foley, but I mean, a lot of people don't, for the simple fact that he's hardcore or sort of that backyard style. But I mean, if you look at Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, in retrospect, they trained in the backyard, or that's kind of how they apply their craft, and they're two of the biggest superstars in today's wrestling world. So, I mean,
well, it's not just that as far as Foley is concerned, but I think Foley kind of try to reach every single audience by any means necessary. Like for a hardcore style, or like for a wrestling audience, for a hardcore style audience, he would reach them with wrestling, or just Death Defying. But like for a children's perspective, he would write children's books. So I think the perception of that is trying to reach any and every spectrum of the audience while you can. Well, speaking of sports entertainment, speaking of any and everything associated with it, well, WWE has recently went from the wrestling form that was so much, the style in the 70s and 80s, and went towards sports entertainment, which is now the 90s and our generations on. But sports entertainment has its roots, not just with WWE. So my question is, who or which company, I mean, there are a ton of companies that are responsible for wrestling, but who in particular is responsible for sports entertainment and the wrestling industry? And this is a very broad question here.
Well, really, to be honest with you and to answer your question, I've had some time really to think about this question, and I'm going to say the government. Now you're going to be like, Robert, why are you saying the government? Well, I'm saying the government because you and me both work indie wrestling here in Arkansas, where we're recording this from, and we have to deal with an athletic commission, and a lot of times say, hey, you have a lot of rules that we don't like and stuff like that. So I think WWE made itself sports entertainment to try to avoid avoid all those licenses and fees and stuff that the government imposes upon them. I know you probably have a different viewpoint.
I would totally agree. Not necessarily of the viewpoint, but also as far as I mean, if you go back to the whole debacle of the Great American Bash 1988 pay-per-view, which I'm pretty sure the Four Horsemen do not want to relive, especially for Lex Luger in that fact, in which Lex Luger, was busted because of outside interference. If you go back and take a look at the tape, and you can watch all the matches on YouTube, by the way, I think the commission had a big time effect on that, just like it has a big time effect on this. But I will say, to answer that question, I think sometimes the commission, I do agree with you on that. But also, as far as Cena's been put over today, and a lot of other guys been put over today, I think one particular company could be partially responsible for that direction. And I think it's the USWA wrestling promotion in the 90s.
Well, what makes you say that it's USWA?
Well, if you really, and me being from Memphis, if you really look back at it, Jerry Lawler, of course, he was the John Cena of Memphis wrestling. And the reason why I say that is because he dominated pretty much the whole 4 decades of Memphis wrestling. Jerry Lawler was a bigger star. But the reason why I would say that is because Memphis wrestling had a ton of gimmicks going towards kids. As far as Cowabunga was a character, a parody of the Ninja Turtles deal, and also Freddy Krueger, and also Leatherface got coming to a ring with a big fat chainsaw. So I would say they're partially responsible.
Well, that's going to move to our next question, and I really got a good question because this is really what's bothering me. Now, my question is the concept of kayfabe still alive? Now, a lot of our listeners may not know what that term actually means, so it is, I looked it up, and Wikipedia defines it as a portrayal of events as real or true. So basically, it's presenting wrestling, or it's the ideal or concept of presenting wrestling as real, as it's not a work, as it's straight. So I'll start the clock, D, and I'll let you kind of give your thoughts. Do you think really wrestlers are still holding to kayfabe, or do you think it's really a dead concept?
Well, if you want to answer it that way, answer it in theater terms. I mean, would the actual theater person or would the actual character, whoever's playing Romeo, will he still be in character? Or will he go off script and go off character and tell everyone, hey, this is a stage? I think you could apply that question to wrestling. But, I'm with Steamboat on this one. When you get out there outside the curtain, or may I say, when you get out there in front of the curtain and get out there on your main stage, you are your character, or you are that wrestler. But away from the curtains, and once you get off stage, then the real life comes into effect.
Well, I'm really going to answer my question. I really don't think the kayfabe concept is really held to anymore, and I think there's really a lot of contributing factors that play a part into it not being alive. One, you have the advent of national TV, you have the advent of the internet. Technology, I think, has killed kayfabe. So, I mean, in this day that we're living in, it's kind of hard to be in character all the time. Like, for example, if I'm a bad guy in WWE, like maybe Big Show, it's very hard to go out and be a bad guy all the time. Although you're with WWE, I mean, they could portray it a little bit better, or as being keeping him in character. But I mean, with their anti-bullying stuff and really their PG direction, it's really hard to stay in kayfabe. And also, the reason why I say it's dead, TNA recently had a house show, their baseball event you may be aware of in Memphis. Well, the concept of kayfabe, if you're a bad guy, you're not going to be taking photo ops and interacting with the fans. Well, a lot of the bad guys were out there just taking photo ops and stuff like that, like it was no big deal, like Kazarian and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's why I really say kayfabe It's dead.
And also think about this. This is a question that can go towards theater, or it can also go towards wrestling, but also go towards sports as well. And that brings to this question. And in the 80s, or may I say in the early days of wrestling, world championships or just championship titles in particular, a lot of times they're not very scarce or not very defended a whole lot now than it was back in the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s. And that brings me to this question. How many title defenses should a champion have? And for me, as far as the champion is concerned, the reason I put this question is to tie in with the next question. Should a champion be a champion and defend the title?
Well, I mean, you really do have two good questions there, Cornbread D. I know you and me disagree on this a whole lot, but I really think once every 30 days. I think that is a good time to defend the title, at least once every 30 days. As I know we kind of argue if a championship should be defended on live TV or not, or if it should be held to pay-per-view. And, I mean, you and me kind of, like I said, we clash on this. Really, it depends on what you're trying to do. In terms of television, if we're looking at this from a television perspective, if you got to get ratings, but you also need pay-per-view buys, or there's no purpose for having pay-per-views. So, I mean, you really got to do a balancing act when it comes to title defenses.
Well, not just that, but also if you're a champion, prove you're a champion. Not just so much once every 30 days, and then you just have a straight-up dead period, and then all of a sudden you get distracted of not defending the championship so very often, to the point where you're just a pay-per-view champion or a television champion. Because here's the thing. A TV title is defended on television and on pay-per-view. You don't want to limit your world championship title defenses to just pay-per-view only. Because a point in time, you're going to have, whether you win or whether you lose, sometimes you're going to have that world championship or any championship in that matter be defended on television. That way you can appear to the local markets of the television, not just so much of the company, but to the local markets. Because the local markets, keep this in mind, you got advertisers. And you don't want to screw that up with advertisers if you're just limited to just title defenses on pay-per-view only.
Okay, that was some good points that you made on that question. Well, the next question, I'm going to get the timer going back, is what impact have celebrities had on professional wrestling? And I kind of want to get your thought on that once I get the time reset.
Well, a lot of things have become globalized in our area. And with WrestleMania having the big stars, I mean, let's go back to all the big events, or may I say the inaugural events. Starrcade. The very first Starrcade didn't have many stars. There was just a supercard of a ton of guys. WrestleMania had Liberace. They kind of made it to almost, like a Hollywood, type of festival type of event. And TNA, when they went to pay-per-view, their first ever pay-per-view in 2002, I mean, they had Toby Keith on the card, but it was mostly geared towards wrestling. So I think it all depends on if you're, celebrities has had a big effect, music-wise and talent-wise as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally agree with you on that, Cornbread D. Really, if you look at all the celebrities on professional wrestling, you've had Dennis Rodman has came in. You have Jay Leno. You have David Arquette. You've had Chuck Norris. I mean, and if you look from Rodman, Leno, and David Arquette, they really, for WCW, they had a good impact to get people to talk, but then again, they had a bad impact, especially with David Arquette, and a lot of controversy concerning the WCW title and giving him the championship. So, I mean, but usually celebrities, if you use them right, they bring a lot of exposure to your brand, to your company, and get new eyes looking at your product, which is what you want to do. First rule of business, I know this isn't a business discussion, but it's to grow your company. Hey, and that's what you want to do. And by using celebrities and using them in the right way, that's going to greatly help you. So I'll let you give maybe some final thoughts on it.
Well, as far as that's concerned, and even with celebrities, you want to make sure that celebrities are given the opportunity, but you also want to as I was told, the old saying goes, "Be careful who you trust." And if you could trust a certain celebrity to a point where hey, this individual is not about himself and it's not about the money, but is more about help promote the company, then yes, that will work. But if it's all about the money and pretty much wanting more for doing less, then you really are not going to benefit yourself big time. Well, we had mentioned celebrities, and I had mentioned the big events, as far like WrestleMania and a lot of big time events. Here's some big time stats for you. WrestleMania coming to a city. To be honest, it benefits the city. And with wrestling coming to a city, benefits a city, especially 300 plus days a year, than it would for any other sports, which is just 17 weeks and then one big event and really, not being able to deliver. So my question to you is this: why do major cities need professional wrestling? And I got some stats, but why do cities need wrestling? Especially since it is a year-round sport.
You make a good point there, D, as to why major cities need pro wrestling. And, if you want to look at it from an economic impact, like you mentioned WrestleMania, they draw millions, not just one, millions of dollars for a city. So, they make a great impact on pro wrestling in terms of revenue. So, major cities, I really think, do need pro wrestling.
Well, here's a couple of stats. Here's a couple of stats for you that there were research. Like this coming WrestleMania, which is 29, which would be at MetLife Stadium, expected to make $70 million for the city. WrestleMania 28 of this year, $67 million for the city. Now, here's Atlanta's WrestleMania. $62 million. Do you want to know what that's equivalent to? That's equivalent to 621 full-time jobs. Now, a lot of people say, hey, what's the point of wrestling? Wrestling's a dead sport. I totally disagree with that statement because wrestling adds so much, and you can get a whole lot of sponsors with wrestling than you would do any other sport, especially if it's year-round.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points. I know this is really your question, and I'm sure you probably have a lot more thoughts on it. I know you said you had some stats. And kind of what you said, how many jobs?
That's 621. That's 62. Compare that WrestleMania 28 stat. Or may I say 27 stat from Atlanta. $62 million. 621 full-time jobs. Yes. 621. Go look up the stats. But, you think that's a plus for a city or negative for a city?
Well, I think it's good, but we've got to move on. We've met our 2-minute time limit for that. Now, really, this is my last question. This is question number 5 for me. Now, my question is, why do more women not watch professional wrestling? And now, studies have shown that here in the last couple of years, the audience for WWE and pro wrestling has increased. And I think it's mainly been because of John Cena and stuff like that, mainly John Cena. But, and I've talked to a lot of women and that used to watch wrestling. I don't think they do anymore. But I'll get your opinion first, and I'll kind of weigh in on it a little bit more.
Well, I think the reason this is one of the tough, tricky questions because when you talk about women watching professional wrestling, normally everybody tunes in immediately to WWE and think it's all about, women dressing scantily or, wearing bikinis or, people and even certain religious groups have their different opinions on, hey, we shouldn't watch this, we shouldn't watch that. But to me, I don't think wrestling should just be limited to WWE, and I think that's where the problem is as far as stereotype is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, you do make a good point. I mean, this is the show is called Power of Pro Wrestling, and it's anything and everything pro wrestling. So, I mean, we really have to look at wrestling as a whole in terms of that. And really, here's kind of my 2 cents I'm going to throw in. A lot of the ladies that used to watch wrestling that don't anymore, the main reason, and this is going to sound odd, I really don't get it. What's Stone Cold? They tell me Stone Cold. Why do you think Stone Cold?
And well, I think a lot of times the reason why it is Stone Cold because he has a rebellious style attitude. And the reason why the Attitude Era worked for that particular time is because, Stone Cold did what to Vince McMahon, what a lot of us would do that are employed, or what a lot of us would want to do to our bosses. So maybe that's one of the reasons. And I think another one of the reasons why women was watching is because the whole, a whole lot of cursing, a whole lot of scantily dress. But here's a stat for you. 57% of those who watch wrestling are males between the ages of 20 and 35. 20% are the ones watching under the age of 20. And here's a crazy stat for you. 23.8% are those who watch wrestling that are between the ages of 35 and 63.
Yeah, that's some good stats, and I'm going to give some final thoughts because I know our 2 minutes are up. But, I mean, really, if you always look at it from this perspective, is if the roles were reversed, if you had a bunch of half-naked women rolling around, hey, those guys are going to flock to that. So that's why I asked this question, is because you got a bunch of half-naked men rolling around each other. If I was a girl, I'd be eating that up. But I think we have our final question, D. So do you want to ask your final question?
Well, I think in response to that one before the final one, I think it all depends on how you're perceived as well. Well, as some people may have or have not heard, if you have not heard, then this is brand new news to you. MMA and boxing are becoming now, they want to push those sports as the top sports in the Olympics and take amateur wrestling out of it. Yeah, right. You may think I'm joking on this. No, I'm not. My question to you is, and, think about any and everybody that's competed in Olympic wrestling and amateur wrestling at that. My question to you is, do you believe that wrestling belongs in the Olympics, amateur or pro?
Well, at least in terms of amateur, yes, I do believe wrestling belongs in the Olympics. If you really look at the Olympics for what it's supposed to be, it's about tradition. And pro wrestling is about tradition. So I really think wrestling fits hand in hand with the Olympics. Now, I'm really sad if they are thinking about taking wrestling away from the Olympics.
Because to be honest, wrestling is a whole lot safer than MMA and boxing in this particular form. And here's some eye-popping stats for you. Over 40 guys have competed in the Olympics. Over 40 wrestlers. And here's a stat for you. 17 have been World Tag Team Champs of any kind. 1 has been European champion. 2 have been Intercontinental champions. And 8 of them have been World's Heavyweight champions. Now, explain that to me in a different perspective of why you should not, take wrestling out of it.
This is one time, like I said, I'm in agreement with you. I really think they need to keep wrestling in the Olympics. And, I think they're really dumb if they are going to try to get rid of it.
And here's the thing. Wrestling is not a dying sport. It's not. Despite what a lot of people may say, wrestling is not a dying sport. If you really think it's a dying sport, then watch Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Monday nights. Watch Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern as well. Watch Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. And you tell me, and if for those of you who get Ring of Honor syndication, watch that at their normal time, and you tell me that's a dying sport. Because to me it's not, and I think it belongs in the Olympics, especially with this stat right here, and only one guy has met all those stats and is an Olympic gold medalist, and that's Kurt Angle.
Well, I mean, that's a good point to end on. I mean, these have been some very good questions that we've asked today. But that's enough for the Power of Professional Wrestling. Well, I want to do a shout-out to some of our sponsors. Big Crutch Media. You can go and check that site out. It is a gaming website. It's bigcrutchmedia.com. I'll let you tell more about my friend Kevin's site. That's from Flab to Fab.
Of course, Flab to Fab. Awesome site. Please go support them. Look it up online. Plus, JonesBoroWrestling.com. That's where you can get all of your favorite stats, plus podcasts like this one. And OCW website, strictlyocw.webstars.com. We'll have any and everything. And please, if you're inside the Walnut Ridge, Hoxie area, or Jonesboro for that matter, come on down to Hoxie. It's the 609 Southeast Gibson Drive, Hoxie, Arkansas. Every single Saturday night beginning at 7:05. Plus, JonesBoroWrestling.com, any and everything you need to know. And if you got some questions, hey, hit us up.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you can leave some questions on our Jonesboro Wrestling website. I do have comments enabled. Also, you can hit me up on Twitter at @TheMarkWonders. If you have any questions. You can also hit me up on Facebook, or I have set up a specific email address, so I'm hoping it works because we're going to look really bad if it doesn't, but it is podcast@JonesboroWrestling.com.
And here's the thing. We're not going to just ask you to send some questions in and then we just kick them to the side and we just kind of modify the questions all in one. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to answer your questions and we're going to answer them straightforward. And we're going to do what's rightfully ours. We're going to respect you, the audience. You send us a question, we're going to answer it. We're not going to bully or dilly-dally around. We're going to do our research and we're going to answer our questions straight up for you.
Yeah, and also, I mean, and I want your guys' feedback. If you want us to do a live show to where you can call in and give us your questions and kind of answer it at live via the podcast, you can do that. Also, we have some segments we're going to work on for future podcasts. But we've really ran long on time for this first podcast. But I do want to thank you for joining us. Once again, D, thank you for joining us.
You guys rock. Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, this has been Robert Red for JonesboroWrestling.com. You guys have a wonderful night.